The pre-dawn air in Atlanta carried the weight of summer humidity, thick enough to make breathing feel like work. At 4:47 a.m., while most of the city still slept beneath cotton sheets and air conditioning, Lorraine Miller was already awake. Not by choice. Never by choice. Her alarm hadn't gone off. Her body didn't need it anymore. After 3 years of the same brutal schedule, her internal clock had surrendered to the routine. Wake at 4:45, dress in the dark, catch the 5:20 bus from the West End, arrive at the Buckhead mansion by 6:30, before the family stirred, before they had to see her arrive, before she became visible. Lorraine stood in front of the cracked bathroom mirror of her studio apartment, studying a face that had aged faster than its 42 years. Dark circles carved permanent shadows beneath her eyes. Her hands, rough from years of bleach and scrubbing, trembled slightly as she tied her hair back into a tight bun. The uniform hung on her frame: navy blue dress, white apron, sensible shoes that had lost their cushioning months ago. She packed her lunch into a worn canvas bag, a sandwich made from yesterday's discount bread, an apple with a soft spot she'd cut around, a small container of leftover rice and beans. It was more than she needed. It was always more than she needed. The bus ride took 53 minutes, winding through neighborhoods that transformed like a time-lapse of inequality. From her street, cracked sidewalks, barred windows, corner stores with bulletproof glass, to Buckhead's tree-lined avenues where homes hid behind gates and landscaping that cost more than her annual salary. Lorraine had learned to make herself small on these rides, to avoid eye contact, to ignore the way some passengers shifted away when she sat down, as if poverty might be contagious. She'd perfected the art of invisibility long before she started working for the Ashford family. The mansion loomed at the end of a circular driveway, all white columns and pristine windows that reflected the rising sun like accusatory eyes. 6 bedrooms for 3 people, 4 bathrooms that Lorraine cleaned daily, scrubbing toilets that saw less use than the ones in her own apartment building's hallway. Mrs. Patricia Ashford never looked directly at Lorraine. In 3 years, she'd mastered the art of speaking to the space above Lorraine's head, her requests floating out like commands to a ghost. The guest bathroom needs attention. Mr. Ashford's shirts require pressing. Dinner is at 7. We'll need the dining room prepared. Never a please now and never a thank you. Never an acknowledgement that Lorraine had a name, a life, a soul that carried its own weight of exhaustion and dreams deferred. But Lorraine had learned something crucial about invisibility. It worked both ways. While they didn't see her, she saw everything. The arguments behind closed doors. The way Mr. Ashford looked at his phone with barely concealed disgust during family dinners. The college-age daughter who cried quietly in her room, surrounded by everything money could buy except the attention she craved. The Ashfords were drowning in abundance, and they didn't even know it. Lorraine's day was mapped in increments of labor. Vacuum the living room by 8, dust the library by 9:15, change the linens in the master bedroom while they ate breakfast on the terrace, their laughter carrying through windows Lorraine had cleaned until they were invisible themselves. Prepare lunch, clean up after lunch, begin dinner preparations, serve dinner, clean the kitchen until every surface gleamed under lights she could never afford in her own home. By 7:30 p.m., when she finally left through the service entrance, Lorraine's feet felt like they'd been beaten with hammers. Her lower back sang a symphony of pain that no amount of cheap ibuprofen could silence. If you want to see how one woman's simple act of kindness triggered a chain of events that nobody could have predicted, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. You won't believe what happens next. And trust me, you don't want to miss a single moment of this incredible true story. The walk from the mansion to the bus stop took 12 minutes. Lorraine had timed it. She knew every crack in the sidewalk, every overhanging branch, every security camera mounted on gate posts that tracked her movement through the neighborhood like she was a potential threat. It was on this walk 3 months ago that she'd first noticed him. The man sat in the same spot every evening, a narrow alley between a boutique law firm and an upscale coffee shop, the kind that sold single cups for more than Lorraine spent on groceries in a day. He'd wedged himself into the shadows, his back against brick that still held the day's heat, his legs pulled up close to his chest. Most people walked past without seeing him. Or maybe they saw and chose not to see, which Lorraine understood was different, but achieved the same result. He'd become part of the urban landscape, as invisible as the security cameras, the fire hydrants, the mailboxes. But Lorraine saw him, maybe because she understood invisibility from the inside. He was white, probably in his 60s with a beard that had gone gray and wild. His clothes hung on a frame that had once carried more weight. She could tell by the way his shirt collar gaped around his neck. His eyes, when he occasionally lifted them, held something Lorraine recognized, the exhausted acceptance of someone who'd stopped fighting against the current and learned to simply drift. She couldn't explain why she stopped that first evening, couldn't articulate the impulse that made her reach into her canvas bag and pull out half her sandwich. She'd simply walked over, crouched down despite the protest in her knees, and held it out. He'd stared at the sandwich for a long moment, then at her face, searching for the catch, the cruel joke, the hidden price. When he finally took it, his hands shook. "Thank you," he'd whispered, and his voice carried the rasp of disuse like vocal cords that had forgotten their purpose. Lorraine had nodded and walked away, her own stomach rumbling, but feeling something she couldn't quite name. Not pride. She wasn't proud of having so little that sharing half a sandwich felt significant. Not pity. Pity required distance, and she understood too intimately what it meant to be one paycheck, one unexpected expense, one twist of fate away from where he sat. Maybe it was recognition, one invisible person seeing another. She didn't plan to make it a routine. But the next evening she stopped again, and the evening after that. Soon she was packing extra food when she made her lunch. Another sandwich, a piece of fruit, whatever she could spare from her own meager supplies. They rarely spoke. He'd nod when she appeared. She'd hand over the food. Sometimes she'd sit with him for a few minutes, her back against the same wall, both of them watching the well-dressed professionals hurry past toward parking garages and luxury cars. "What's your name?" she'd asked once, during her second week of stopping. He'd been quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Michael." "I'm Lorraine." Another long silence. Then, so softly she almost missed it, "I know kindness when I see it, Lorraine. Thank you." She'd wanted to tell him it wasn't kindness, not really. It was solidarity. It was survival. It was the understanding that in a world that had decided they both didn't matter, maybe they could matter to each other, even in some small, quiet way. But she'd just nodded and stood up, her knees cracking, and continued her walk to the bus stop. 3 months. 90-some days of the same routine. Wake before dawn, work until dusk, share her food, ride the bus home, collapse into bed, and do it all again. Lorraine had stopped expecting anything to change. Change was for people with options, with resources, with the energy to imagine different futures. She'd learned to find a strange peace in the predictability of her days, in the small rebellion of her evening stops, in the quiet companionship of another invisible soul. She had no way of knowing that in exactly 4 days, 2 helicopters would descend from the sky like mechanical angels, and everything she understood about her life, about Michael, about the nature of visibility itself, would shatter like the expensive crystal she dusted daily in the Ashford mansion. On this particular Tuesday evening, as Lorraine approached Michael's spot with her canvas bag and tired smile, she noticed something different. He was sitting straighter than usual, his eyes focused on something in the distance she couldn't see. His hands, usually relaxed in his lap, were clenched into fists. "You okay, Michael?" she asked, settling down beside him and pulling out the wrapped sandwich and orange she'd saved. He took the food mechanically but didn't eat. "There's a storm coming," he said, his voice carrying a strange certainty. "Can you feel it?" Lorraine glanced up at the clear evening sky, the last rays of sunset painting the glass towers gold. "Weather looks fine to me." Michael shook his head slowly. "Not that kind of storm." She didn't press him. She'd learned that sometimes people who lived on the streets developed a different kind of awareness, a sensitivity to shifts and changes that people insulated by walls and routines never noticed. They sat in silence as the light faded and the business district emptied out. Eventually, Lorraine stood, her knees protesting as always, and prepared to continue to her bus stop. "Lorraine!" Michael called as she started to walk away. She turned back. He was looking directly at her now, his eyes clearer than she'd ever seen them. "Whatever happens, I want you to know. You saved me. You just don't know how yet." The words sent a strange chill through her despite the humid heat. "You doing okay, Michael? You need me to call someone?" He smiled, sad and knowing. "No calls necessary. They're already coming." Lorraine didn't know what to make of that, so she simply nodded and continued her walk, his words echoing in her mind all the way home. 4 days. That's all she had left of the life she knew. 4 days until the helicopters. 4 days until everything changed. Wednesday morning arrived with the same suffocating humidity that had marked every Atlanta summer morning Lorraine could remember. She woke at 4:45, the phantom alarm in her body more reliable than any clock, and went through her mechanical routine in the dark. Dress, pack lunch, catch the 5:20 bus. Become invisible before the world woke up to see her. But something felt different today. Michael's words from the previous evening lingered in her mind, like smoke she couldn't wave away. They're already coming. Coming where? Coming for what? She'd encountered enough people on the streets over the years to recognize when someone was slipping, when reality started bending at the edges. Maybe Michael was having one of those episodes. Maybe the heat was getting to him. Maybe she should have insisted on calling someone. The bus rumbled through the transforming neighborhoods, and Lorraine watched the city wake up through windows that needed cleaning, joggers in expensive athletic wear, coffee shops turning on their lights, the daily resurrection of commerce and ambition that never quite reached the neighborhoods where people like her actually lived. At the Ashford mansion, Mrs. Patricia Ashford was already awake and in a mood. Lorraine could tell the moment she entered through the service door, the particular tension in the air, the sharp footsteps on the hardwood floors above, the clipped tone that would make the entire day feel like walking on eggshells made of ice. "You're 3 minutes late," Mrs. Ashford announced from the top of the stairs, checking her watch with the precision of someone who measured worth in seconds. She was dressed in tennis whites, her blonde hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful, her face arranged in an expression of permanent disapproval. Lorraine glanced at the kitchen clock. 6:33 a.m. "I apologize, Mrs. Ashford, the bus is not my concern. Your punctuality is. Mr. Ashford has an important conference call this morning, and his office needs to be spotless. The Hendersons are coming for dinner tonight, which means the dining room needs to be perfect." "Perfect, Lorraine. Not adequate, perfect." "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Ashford descended the stairs with the bearing of someone reviewing troops. "And something needs to be done about the grout in the master bathroom. It's looking dingy. I want it bleached until it's white again. Truly white, not off-white." Lorraine thought about the grout, which she'd scrubbed on her hands and knees just 2 days ago until her shoulders burned, and her fingers were raw. She thought about how grout aged, how some things couldn't be restored to their original state no matter how much effort you applied. She thought about a lot of things, but she said only, "Yes, ma'am." The day unfolded in its predictable rhythm of labor and invisibility. Lorraine cleaned Mr. Ashford's office while he conducted his conference call in the den, his voice booming with false heartiness as he discussed quarterly profits and market expansions. She scrubbed the grout until the fumes made her dizzy. She prepared the ingredients for the evening's dinner, a task that would take hours of chopping, measuring, arranging, all so the Ashfords could present it as if they'd done the work themselves. Around noon, while Lorraine was polishing the silver serving pieces, the daughter, Madison, 20 years old and home from college for the summer, wandered into the kitchen. She was pretty in the way wealthy young women often were, with the kind of casual beauty that came from good nutrition, better skin care, and the absence of stress that carved lines into faces like Lorraine's. "Oh, hey," Madison said, seeming surprised to find Lorraine there, despite the fact that Lorraine had worked in this house for 3 years. "Is there any of that quinoa salad left from yesterday?" "I'll check for you, Miss Madison," Lorraine said, opening the refrigerator. "You don't have to call me Miss," Madison said, but her tone suggested this was a script she'd rehearsed, a performance of progressive politics that didn't actually challenge the fundamental structure of their relationship. She scrolled through her phone while Lorraine located the salad, plated it, and set it on the marble island. "Thank you," Madison said absently, already walking away toward the terrace where she'd eat while video chatting with friends about things Lorraine would never understand or be invited to understand. By 7:30 p.m., when Lorraine finally left through the service entrance, she'd been on her feet for 13 hours. The dinner had been a success, which meant the Ashfords had received compliments they'd accepted, without mentioning Lorraine's name. The kitchen was spotless, the dishes done, the leftovers properly stored. Tomorrow, she'd return and do it all again. The evening air was somehow heavier than the morning's humidity, pressing down on her shoulders as she walked toward the bus stop. Her canvas bag felt lighter. She'd packed extra food today, remembering Michael's strange mood from the previous evening. He was there in his usual spot in the alley, but something was unmistakably different. He'd shaved. Not completely, but enough that his face was visible beneath the gray beard. His clothes, while still worn, had been arranged more carefully, and his eyes, those eyes that usually held the exhausted blankness of someone who'd stopped expecting anything, now carried a sharp awareness that made Lorraine pause. "Michael?" She approached cautiously, holding out the sandwich and apple she'd brought. "You okay?" He took the food but set it aside immediately. "Sit with me," he said. "Please, I need to tell you something." The urgency in his voice made her comply, despite her protesting knees and the bus she'd miss if she stayed too long. She lowered herself to the pavement beside him, her back against the brick wall that held the day's heat like a memory. "I haven't been completely honest with you," Michael began, staring straight ahead at the empty street. "About who I am. About why I'm here." Lorraine waited. She'd learned that silence was sometimes the greatest gift you could give someone who needed to speak. "My name is Michael. That part's true. Michael Hendricks." He paused, as if testing the weight of his full name. 6 years ago, I had a different life. I was the CEO of Hendricks Global Solutions. Ever heard of it? Lorraine shook her head, though something about the name tickled at the edge of her memory. We did tech security, corporate systems, government contracts, cybersecurity infrastructure. I built it from nothing over 25 years. At our peak, we employed 3,000 people across 15 countries. His voice was steady, matter of fact, as if he were reading someone else's biography. I had a house in Brookhaven, another in Aspen. Cars, boats, all the markers of success that are supposed to mean something. He turned to look at her now, and she saw something in his eyes that she recognized, the particular pain of loss that had no remedy. I also had a daughter, Emma. She was 17, smart, kind, funny. She wanted to study marine biology, save the oceans, change the world. She had her mother's eyes and my stubborn streak. His voice cracked slightly. One night she was driving home from a friend's house. A drunk driver ran a red light. She died instantly. The other driver walked away without a scratch. "Michael, I'm so sorry." He held up a hand. "My wife, Caroline, she couldn't survive it. Not the grief. 6 months later, she overdosed on sleeping pills. The official report called it accidental. I knew better." Lorraine reached out instinctively, placing her hand over his. His skin was rough, weathered but warm. "I tried to keep going," he continued. "Threw myself into work, made more money, closed bigger deals, expanded the company. But everything felt hollow. Every success was just another reminder that Emma would never have her own successes, that Caroline would never see any of it. I was building monuments to nothing." He took a shaky breath. "Then I discovered something. One of my vice presidents had been embezzling, not just stealing money, routing funds through shell corporations, bribing government officials, selling classified security protocols to foreign entities. The kind of thing that doesn't just destroy a company, but can land people in prison for decades." "What did you do?" Lorraine asked quietly. "I confronted him, threatened to go to the authorities. He got there first." Michael's laugh was bitter. He had resources, connections, lawyers I'd helped him afford over the years. By the time the dust settled, he'd framed me for everything, made it look like I was the one who'd orchestrated the whole operation. My own company turned against me. The board voted me out. The government seized my assets. Criminal charges were filed. Lorraine listened, trying to reconcile this story with the quiet man she'd been feeding for 3 months. "I could have fought it, hired lawyers, dragged it through courts for years. But I was tired, Lorraine. So tired. My daughter was dead. My wife was dead. My company, the thing I'd built, the thing I'd sacrificed everything for, had become a weapon against me. What was I fighting for?" He picked up the sandwich she'd brought and turned it over in his hands. "So I walked away. Literally. I had a few thousand in cash they hadn't found yet. I gave it to a homeless shelter and kept just enough for a bus ticket. I came to Atlanta because I'd never been here before, because nobody knew me here, and I sat down in this alley and I stopped pretending any of it mattered." "That was 6 years ago?" Lorraine asked. 6 years, and in all that time I've been invisible. People walk past me every day, drop quarters in my cup sometimes without looking at my face. I became what I always secretly feared I was, someone who didn't matter, whose existence changed nothing, who could disappear, and the world would continue spinning without noticing." He turned to her and his eyes were wet. "Until you. 3 months ago, you stopped. You looked at me. Not through me, not past me, but at me. You saw me, Lorraine, and then you kept seeing me. Every day, you shared food you could barely spare. You sat with me. You treated me like I was human." Lorraine felt her own eyes burning. "You are human, Michael." "I'd forgotten," he said simply. "I'd forgotten what that felt like." They sat in silence for a moment, the street lamps flickering on around them as dusk deepened into night. "Why are you telling me this now?" Lorraine finally asked. Michael's expression shifted, becoming harder to read. Because it's about to end. My invisibility. Tomorrow, or maybe the day after. They're coming for me. Who's coming? My former partner, Richard Chen. The man I trained, promoted, trusted. The man who destroyed everything I built. Michael's jaw tightened. He's been looking for me. I've been careful, stayed off any system, no digital footprint. But he found me anyway. I don't know how, but I know he did. How do you know? Because I've seen them, the last 3 days. Different people, but same pattern. Watching this corner, taking photos. Yesterday, one of them got close enough that I could see the company logo on his briefcase. Hendrix Global Solutions. They're still using my name for the company I no longer own. Lorraine felt a chill despite the heat. What does he want? Loose ends, Michael said. I'm the only person who knows the truth about what he did. The only witness who could unravel his empire if I ever decided to speak up. As long as I was invisible, I wasn't a threat. But if I'm found, if someone connects me to my past, he trailed off. We need to get you somewhere safe, Lorraine said, her mind racing. A shelter, a church somewhere. No, Michael said firmly. I've made my peace with whatever happens, but I needed you to know, because when they come, things might get complicated, and I don't want you caught in the middle of something that has nothing to do with you. If you're in danger, the danger isn't to me, not really. It's to the truth, and maybe that's okay. Maybe the truth is overrated. He smiled sadly. But I wanted you to understand something, Lorraine. These 3 months, these few minutes every evening, they've been the most real thing I've experienced in 6 years. You gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. You reminded me what it means to be seen. Lorraine didn't know what to say. Her bus had definitely left by now. She'd have to wait another 40 minutes for the next one. But she didn't move. Can I ask you something, Michael said. Why did you stop that first day? Why me? Lorraine thought about it, really thought about it, trying to articulate something she'd felt but never examined. Because I understood, she finally said. I spend every day invisible. I walk through that mansion, cleaning, cooking, making everything perfect, and nobody sees me. Not really. I'm a function, not a person. And I see them. See their waste, their unhappiness despite everything they have, and they don't even know I'm there. She paused, gathering her thoughts. When I saw you sitting here, I recognized something. The same invisibility. And I thought, maybe if I see you, if I acknowledge that you exist, that you matter, maybe that means I exist too. Maybe that means I matter. Michael reached over and squeezed her hand. You matter, Lorraine. More than you know. They sat together as the night deepened. Two invisible people making each other visible, neither knowing that in less than 48 hours, the entire world would be watching. Thursday began with rain. A sudden summer storm that turned the streets into rivers and made Lorraine's bus ride even more miserable than usual. Water leaked through a crack in the bus window, dripping steadily onto her shoulder for the entire 53-minute journey. By the time she reached the Ashford mansion, her uniform was damp and her mood darker than the clouds overhead. Mrs. Ashford met her at the service entrance with a look of profound displeasure. You're soaked. Don't drip on the floors. Change in the laundry room and start immediately. We have the Caldwells visiting this afternoon and everything needs to be impeccable. Lorraine changed into her spare uniform, grateful she'd learned years ago to keep one at the house. As she wrung out her wet clothes over the utility sink, she thought about Michael's revelation from the previous evening. A CEO, a man who'd lost everything, a target. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was building, that the strange tension Michael had mentioned was real and approaching fast. But what could she do? She was just a maid. She had no power, no resources, no ability to protect anyone. She could barely protect herself. The morning passed in a blur of frantic preparation. Lorraine polished furniture until she could see her reflection. She arranged fresh flowers in the entry hall. She prepared tea service and finger sandwiches for the afternoon visit, all while Mrs. Ashford followed behind her like a particularly critical ghost, finding fault in invisible imperfections. The arrangement is too asymmetrical, Mrs. Ashford said of the flowers Lorraine had spent 20 minutes positioning. Do it again. Lorraine did it again. The silver isn't bright enough. More polish. More polish. Why does this room smell like lemons? I specifically said I wanted lavender. Lavender it was. By noon, when the Caldwells arrived, an elderly couple who seemed kind enough but largely ignored Lorraine's existence, she felt wrung out like the uniform she'd hung to dry in the laundry room. She served tea, refilled cups, removed plates, all while the four of them discussed charity galas and property values and the difficulty of finding good help these days. "We've gone through 3 housekeepers this year," Mrs. Caldwell sighed dramatically. "They simply don't make them like they used to. No work ethic." Lorraine, who'd been working since 4:45 that morning and wouldn't leave until after 8 p.m., said nothing. Invisibility had its advantages. She didn't have to pretend these conversations made sense. Around 3 p.m., as Lorraine was cleaning up the tea service in the kitchen, Madison appeared. The young woman looked upset, her eyes red-rimmed, her phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. "Do you ever feel like nobody actually sees you?" Madison asked suddenly. Lorraine paused in the middle of loading the dishwasher. It was the first time in 3 years that Madison had asked her a direct question that wasn't about food location or household supplies. "Sometimes," Lorraine said carefully, unsure where this was going. "My mom talks about me like I'm this perfect accessory. My dad barely looks up from his phone when I'm in the room. My friends," she laughed bitterly, "my friends care more about my Instagram than about me. I could disappear tomorrow and nobody would notice. They'd just post 'thinking of you' on my last photo and move on." Lorraine set down the plate she was holding. "I'd notice." Madison looked at her. Really looked at her. Maybe for the first time. "Would you?" "Yes," Lorraine said simply. "You're kind. You say thank you. You're the only person in this house who's ever asked me how I'm doing." "I did? Last month. I had a cold. You asked if I was feeling okay." Madison's eyes widened slightly, as if surprised by her own decency. "I don't even remember that." "Small kindnesses matter," Lorraine said. "Sometimes they matter most." They stood in silence for a moment, 2 women from completely different worlds, connected briefly by the shared experience of feeling invisible in different ways. "I'm sorry," Madison said quietly, "for how my mom treats you, for how we all treat you. It's not right." "It's okay." "No, it's not." Madison's voice was firm. "It's not okay, and I'm going to do better. I'm going to see you. I promise." Before Lorraine could respond, Mrs. Ashford's voice cut through the moment like a knife. "Madison, the Caldwells are leaving. Come say goodbye properly." Madison left, but she glanced back once and something in her expression had changed. The rest of the afternoon passed in the usual routine. By the time Lorraine left at 7:45 p.m., the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and steaming. The air smelled like wet concrete and summer flowers. She walked toward Michael's alley with a mixture of anticipation and dread. After his revelations yesterday, she wasn't sure what to expect. Would he still be there? Had his former partner already found him? He was there, sitting in his usual spot, but he wasn't alone. A man in an expensive suit stood over him. Tall, Asian, probably in his 50s, with the kind of rigid posture that suggested military training or extreme self-discipline. 2 others flanked him, younger men in black tactical gear that seemed excessive for the peaceful street corner. Lorraine's first instinct was to turn around, to avoid whatever confrontation was happening. But then Michael looked up and saw her, and something in his expression made her move forward instead. "Lorraine, don't," Michael started to say. "Michael, who is this?" she asked, positioning herself slightly between him and the suited man. The man's eyes shifted to her, calculating and cold. "I'm Richard Chen. And you are?" "A friend," Lorraine said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "A friend," Richard repeated, his tone suggesting he found the concept amusing. "Michael, you've been busy, making friends in low places now. Leave her out of this, Richard." "I'm not in anything to be left out of," Lorraine said, though her heart was hammering. "This is a public street. You're harassing a homeless man." Richard's smile was razor-thin. "Homeless? Is that what he told you? Did he mention that he's worth approximately $47 million? That he's a fugitive from federal charges? That he's been hiding from justice for 6 years?" "I'm not hiding from justice," Michael said quietly. "I'm hiding from you." "Same thing," Richard replied smoothly. "You stole from the company, Michael. You betrayed everything we built together. And then you ran like a coward." "I never stole anything. You framed me. You're the one who—" "Save it," Richard cut him off. "Your story doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that you're coming with me. We're going to straighten this out. Properly. Through legal channels." "Legal channels." Michael laughed bitterly. "You mean your lawyers, your judges, your bought and paid for system?" Lorraine watched this exchange, trying to understand what was really happening. Was Michael telling the truth about being framed? Was Richard the criminal here? Or was she watching a guilty man being brought to justice? "Ma'am," one of the tactical gear men addressed her, "you should leave now." This doesn't concern you. If you're taking him somewhere, I want to know where, Lorraine said. I want to know he'll be safe. Richard studied her with renewed interest. You really do care about him. How touching. Tell me, did he mention his wife and daughter? The family he abandoned? They died, Lorraine said sharply. He didn't abandon them. Ah, so he did share his sob story. Did he also mention that his negligence contributed to his daughter's death? That she was driving a car he'd bought her, against her mother's wishes when she was still too inexperienced to handle it? That he chose a board meeting over her recital the day she died? Michael's face had gone pale. That's not... You have no right. I have every right. You made yourself a victim, Michael, but you were never innocent. You were just weak. Lorraine felt something shift in her chest. A rising anger that surprised her with its intensity. This man, this polished, powerful man, was doing to Michael exactly what Mrs. Ashford did to her every day. He was making him invisible, making his pain meaningless, reducing a complex human being to a simple narrative that served Richard's purposes. You don't know him, Lorraine said, her voice low and fierce. You don't know what he's survived. You don't know his heart. And you do? After 3 months of feeding him sandwiches? Richard's tone was mocking. You're a maid, aren't you? I can tell by the uniform. You probably make, what, $30,000 a year? And you're lecturing me about understanding people? The casual cruelty of it, the easy dismissal of her worth based on her income, hit Lorraine like a physical blow. But it also crystallized something for her. This was what power looked like. This was what it meant to have the resources to make other people disappear. I'm calling the police, Lorraine said, pulling out her phone. Go ahead, Richard replied calmly. I'll explain to them that Michael Hendricks, wanted for embezzlement and fraud, has been located. I'm sure they'll be very interested. Michael stood slowly, his joints cracking. Don't, Lorraine, he's right, I'm wanted. If the police come, they'll just do his work for him. So what, you just go with him? Let him take you wherever he wants? What choice do I have? Michael's voice was resigned, exhausted. I've been running for 6 years, I'm tired. Maybe it's time to face whatever happens. No, Lorraine said firmly, though she had no plan, no idea what she could actually do. No, that's not... The sound of helicopter rotors cut through the air, distant, but approaching fast. Everyone looked up at the sky. Right on time, Richard said with satisfaction. My transportation has arrived. 2 helicopters appeared over the buildings, black and sleek, descending toward the street with military precision. The wind from their rotors sent trash swirling through the alley, forced pedestrians to shield their faces, brought the evening traffic to a confused halt. Lorraine watched them land, one in the intersection causing cars to swerve and honk, the other in a small parking lot across the street, and felt the ground shift beneath her feet. This was it. Whatever Michael had sensed coming, whatever storm he'd warned her about, it was here, and she was standing right in the middle of it. The helicopters settling onto the Atlanta street created a scene of absolute chaos. Car alarms shrieked. Pedestrians scrambled for safety. Shop owners emerged from doorways, phones raised to capture video. The evening commute ground to a complete halt as the rotors kicked up debris and the noise drowned out every other sound. Lorraine stood frozen, her hand still gripping her phone, watching as the side door of the first helicopter slid open. More men in tactical gear emerged, creating a perimeter. Then came someone different, a woman in her 60s, gray hair cut short, wearing a sharp pantsuit that probably cost more than Lorraine made in 3 months. She walked directly toward Richard Chen, ignoring the chaos she'd caused, ignoring Michael, ignoring Lorraine completely. The two conferred in low voices, their body language suggesting disagreement. This is insane, Lorraine muttered. You can't just land helicopters in the middle of the city. They can do anything they want, Michael said quietly beside her. That's what you learn when you have enough money. Rules become suggestions. Laws become negotiable. The woman in the pantsuit finally turned toward Michael, her expression unreadable. Mr. Hendricks. It's been a long time. Margaret, Michael acknowledged. Still doing Richard's dirty work, I see. I prefer to think of it as cleaning up messes. Margaret's tone was crisp, professional. And you've been quite a mess to locate. 6 years off the grid. Impressive, really. If not for your friend here. She glanced at Lorraine dismissively. We might never have found you. Lorraine felt ice spread through her chest. What are you talking about? I didn't... 3 months ago you started a routine. Same time, same place every evening. Patterns create visibility, even for invisible people. Margaret pulled out a tablet, swiped through something. We've had surveillance on every homeless encampment and gathering spot in major cities for 3 years. But isolated individuals were harder. Then our facial recognition software flagged someone who kept appearing in the same location. Not the homeless man, you. The algorithm noticed the consistency. Once we started watching you, we found him. The realization hit Lorraine like a punch to the stomach. Her kindness, the one good thing she'd managed to do in her exhausting life, had led them straight to Michael. She'd betrayed him without even knowing it. "It's not your fault," Michael said, reading her expression. "Lorraine, look at me, it's not your fault." "He's right," Margaret said coolly. "You were simply doing what good people do. Unfortunately, good intentions don't change outcomes." She turned back to Michael. "We need to talk, privately. You can come willingly, or what?" A new voice cut through the noise. "You'll kidnap a homeless man in front of dozens of witnesses? In front of cameras?" Everyone turned. Madison Ashford stood at the edge of the crowd that had gathered, her phone held high, clearly recording. She was still wearing the casual designer clothes from earlier, but her expression had transformed from uncertain privilege to fierce determination. "Madison?" Lorraine said, bewildered. "What are you doing here?" "I followed you," Madison said simply. "After our conversation today, I wanted to understand your life, see what you see. So I followed you." She kept her phone steady on the scene. "And now 50,000 people are watching this live on my Instagram. Want to tell them why you're threatening an elderly homeless man with private military contractors?" Margaret's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Richard stepped forward, his calculated calm slipping slightly. "Miss, this is a private matter. I suggest you—" 53,000 now," Madison interrupted. "Funny how fast things go viral. Justice for Michael is already trending. Want me to explain to my followers who you are? What company you represent?" Lorraine watched in amazement as this young woman, this girl she'd dismissed as just another privileged child, wielded her privilege like a weapon on behalf of someone who had none. "You don't understand what's happening here," Richard said, forcing his voice back to measured tones. "This man is a criminal. We're simply—" "Then call the police," Madison challenged. "If he's a criminal, call them. Don't show up with helicopters and private security. That's not justice, that's intimidation." The crowd was growing, drawn by the helicopters and now held by the confrontation. Lorraine could see phones everywhere, recording from multiple angles. Whatever had been a private hunt had become a very public spectacle. Margaret leaned close to Richard, whispering urgently. He shook his head. She whispered again, more insistently. Finally, Richard's shoulders dropped slightly, the first sign of defeat Lorraine had seen. "Fine," Richard said loudly, addressing the crowd and cameras as much as Michael. "We simply wanted to talk to an old friend." Clearly, the timing was poor. "Michael," he handed him a business card. "When you're ready to discuss what you owe, call me. We can resolve this quietly, or we can do it publicly. Your choice." It was a retreat disguised as magnanimity, and everyone knew it. Richard and Margaret walked back toward the helicopters, their security team following. The rotors spun up again, and within minutes both aircraft lifted off, leaving behind trash swirling in their wake, and dozens of stunned onlookers. The crowd began to disperse slowly, people checking their phones, sharing videos, chattering excitedly about what they'd just witnessed. But Madison stayed, lowering her phone finally, her hands shaking slightly. "Are you okay?" she asked Lorraine. "I wasn't sure what to do. I just knew you needed help." Lorraine pulled the young woman into a hug, surprising both of them. "Thank you. Thank you so much." When she released Madison, she turned to Michael, who was staring at the business card in his hand like it might explode. "Michael, I need to sit down," he said, lowering himself back to the pavement. He looked decades older than he had minutes before. That was close. Too close. Lorraine sat beside him, and after a moment's hesitation, Madison joined them, her expensive jeans touching the dirty sidewalk without apparent concern. "So," Madison said, "someone want to explain what just happened? Who were those people? Why did they want you?" Michael and Lorraine exchanged glances. Then slowly, Michael began to tell his story again. The company, the betrayal, the losses, the years of hiding. Madison listened without interruption, her expression shifting from curiosity to horror to fierce sympathy. "That's insane," she said when he finished. "They can't just get away with that. There has to be evidence, proof of what really happened." "There probably is," Michael said wearily. "Buried in servers and encrypted files I no longer have access to." "Richard's smart. He would have covered his tracks, but not perfectly. Nobody's perfect. But proving it would require resources I don't have. Lawyers, investigators, time, money, all the things I gave up 6 years ago. What if you had those resources? Madison asked thoughtfully. What do you mean? I mean, Madison pulled out her phone again, scrolling through something. This video has 200,000 views already. People are angry. They're asking questions. There are lawyers commenting, offering to look into your case. Journalists wanting interviews. You're not invisible anymore, Michael. You're visible. Very visible. Michael looked stricken rather than relieved. Visibility means vulnerability. It means Richard can find me anytime. It means you can't hide anymore, Madison said gently. But maybe hiding isn't the answer. Maybe fighting back is. Lorraine watched this exchange, seeing the possibilities bloom and the dangers multiply. Michael was right. Visibility meant vulnerability. But Madison was also right. Sometimes hiding just delayed the inevitable. Sometimes you had to stand and face what was coming. I'm scared, Michael admitted. I've been scared for 6 years, that's why I ran. Not because I was guilty, but because I was terrified. Fear makes sense, Lorraine said, taking his hand. But you're not alone this time. You weren't alone for 3 months, and you're definitely not alone now. A police car pulled up to the curb, lights flashing. 2 officers emerged, looking around at the lingering crowd and settling on the 3 people sitting against the wall. We got calls about helicopters landing illegally, the older officer said. Anyone want to explain what happened here? Madison stood, brushing off her jeans. Officers, I have video of the entire incident. I'd be happy to provide a statement. She shot Lorraine and Michael a look that clearly said, trust me. The next hour passed in a blur of statements and questions. Madison handled the officers with the same confidence she'd used against Richard Chen, providing just enough information to satisfy them, without revealing details that might endanger Michael. The officers eventually left with warnings about public disturbances and instructions to call if the helicopters returned. By the time they finished, it was nearly 10 p.m. Lorraine had missed 2 buses and would have to wait another 30 minutes for the last one of the night. Let me drive you home, Madison offered. Both of you. I'm not leaving you here after all this. I don't have a home, Michael reminded her quietly. Tonight you do, Madison said firmly. We have a guest house, it's just sitting empty. You'll stay there at least until we figure out what to do next. Madison, your parents can deal with it, Madison interrupted. I'm 20 years old. It's about time I started making my own decisions about what's right and what's wrong. Lorraine looked at this young woman with new eyes. The uncertain girl from this afternoon had been replaced by someone with purpose, with direction. Sometimes, Lorraine thought, all people needed was a reason to matter, a chance to be more than what others expected. They loaded into Madison's BMW, Michael in the back seat, still clutching Richard's business card, Lorraine in the front, exhausted beyond words. As they drove through Atlanta's nighttime streets, Lorraine's phone buzzed repeatedly. She checked it and saw messages from people she barely knew, all containing links to Madison's video. You're famous, Madison said, glancing at Lorraine's phone. The woman who fed the homeless CEO, that's what they're calling you. I'm not a hero, Lorraine said. I just shared my lunch. Sometimes that's what heroism looks like, Madison replied. Small acts that ripple outward in ways you never expect. They drove through the gates of the Ashford estate, and Lorraine saw it differently now, not as a symbol of everything she lacked, but as a place where something unexpected had begun. A place where an invisible woman, a lost man, and a privileged girl had somehow found each other at exactly the right moment. In the guest house, smaller than the main mansion but nicer than anywhere Lorraine had ever lived, they made Michael comfortable. Madison brought food, blankets, toiletries. Lorraine made sure he was settled, warm, safe. What happens now? Michael asked as they prepared to leave him for the night. Now we figure out how to fight back, Madison said. Together. As Lorraine finally made it home at midnight, collapsing into her own bed in her studio apartment, she realized everything had changed. Michael was no longer invisible. She was no longer invisible. And whatever came next would require a courage she wasn't sure she possessed. But she'd find it. Somehow, she'd find it. Friday morning arrived with unexpected clarity. The storm from 2 days earlier had scrubbed the air clean, leaving behind a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. Lorraine woke at 4:45 out of habit, then remembered with a jolt that everything had changed. Her phone showed 73 missed notifications. The video Madison had posted now had over 1 million views. She lay in bed for an extra 10 minutes, a luxury she couldn't remember the last time she'd allowed herself. and tried to process what had happened. Michael was safe, at least temporarily, but Richard Chen knew where to find him now. And worse, the entire internet knew Michael's story, which meant Richard would be under pressure to respond. Lorraine dragged herself out of bed and went through her morning routine mechanically. Pack lunch, catch the 5:20 bus, arrive at the mansion before the family woke. Except today she wasn't sure what she'd find when she got there. The bus ride felt different. People looked at her, actually looked at her. A woman in scrubs leaned over and whispered, "You're that lady from the video, aren't you? The one who helped that poor man? That was beautiful." Lorraine nodded, unsure how to respond. Invisibility had been uncomfortable, but visibility felt equally strange in its own way. When she arrived at the Ashford mansion and entered through the service door, she found Madison already awake and waiting in the kitchen, still in her pajamas, her laptop open on the marble island. "Lorraine, thank God," Madison said, jumping up. "We need to talk before my mother wakes up. Is Michael okay?" "He's fine. Still sleeping in the guest house, but look at this." Madison turned the laptop around. The screen showed dozens of news articles, social media posts, and what appeared to be legal documents. "It's exploding. The video has been picked up by news stations. People are digging into Hendrix Global Solutions. Journalists are finding inconsistencies in the embezzlement case and..." She clicked to a new tab. "3 different law firms have reached out offering to represent Michael pro bono." Lorraine leaned against the counter, feeling dizzy. "That's good, right?" "It's complicated," Madison said, "because Richard Chen isn't just sitting back. Look." She pulled up a statement from Hendrix Global Solutions' official social media. "We are aware of recent viral content regarding our former CEO, Michael Hendrix. Mr. Hendrix resigned amid serious criminal allegations 6 years ago. We have cooperated fully with law enforcement. The current allegations against the company are baseless and appear designed to rehabilitate Mr. Hendrix's damaged reputation. We will vigorously defend ourselves against any false claims." "They're calling him a liar," Lorraine said flatly. "They're calling us all liars," Madison corrected. "They released another statement saying I'm a privileged college dropout with no understanding of corporate law, and that you're..." She hesitated. "What did they say about me?" Madison's expression was pained. "That you're a well-meaning but uninformed domestic worker who has been manipulated by a con artist. They're questioning your judgment, your intelligence, your..." She stopped, too angry to continue. Lorraine felt the familiar burn of humiliation, the sensation of being reduced to nothing by people who had never bothered to know her. But underneath it, a new feeling stirred. Anger. Real anger. Not the swallowed-down frustration she usually carried, but something sharper and more focused. "Let them question me," Lorraine said quietly. "I know what I saw. I know who Michael is." "That's the spirit," Madison said, "because we're going to need it. One of the lawyers who reached out is really impressive. Victoria Reeves. She used to work for the Justice Department prosecuting corporate fraud. She thinks there's a case here, a real one. She wants to meet with Michael today." "Today?" Lorraine glanced at the clock. "I have to work." "Your mother..." As if summoned by the mention of her name, Patricia Ashford's voice cut through the kitchen. "Madison Elizabeth Ashford, what on earth is going on in this house?" Mrs. Ashford stood in the doorway in her silk robe, her phone clutched in one perfectly manicured hand, her face a mask of controlled fury. "I just received a call from Margaret Peterson." Yes, Margaret Peterson from the Hendrix situation, informing me that not only did my daughter insert herself into a corporate legal matter last night, but that we are now harboring the man at the center of this debacle in our guest house. "Our guest house, Madison." "Mother, I can explain." "I'm not interested in explanations, I'm interested in solutions." Mrs. Ashford's gaze shifted to Lorraine, and for the first time in 3 years, she really looked at her, not through her or past her, but directly at her. "And you brought this mess to our doorstep." "I didn't bring anything," Lorraine said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "I fed a hungry man. That's all." "That's all?" Mrs. Ashford's laugh was sharp and brittle. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Margaret Peterson is on the board of 3 charities I chair. Richard Chen's wife is in my tennis league. This video, this spectacle, it's embarrassing, it's inappropriate, and it ends now." "No," Madison said firmly. "It doesn't." Mrs. Ashford turned to her daughter, genuine shock replacing the anger. "Excuse me?" "I said no, Mother. Michael Hendrix is staying in our guest house. We're helping him find legal representation. And if you have a problem with that, then you have a problem with me. Madison, you have no idea what you're involving yourself in. These are serious people with serious resources. They will destroy anyone who gets in their way. Let them try, Madison said. I have resources too. I have a platform, I have a voice, and I'm going to use it. The silence that followed was profound. Lorraine watched mother and daughter face each other across the pristine kitchen, generations of expectations and disappointments hanging between them like smoke. Finally, Mrs. Ashford spoke, her voice cold. If you continue down this path, there will be consequences. Your father and I will not support this financially or otherwise. I'm not asking for your support, Madison said quietly. I'm asking for your understanding, but I'll take your opposition if that's all you're offering. Mrs. Ashford turned on her heel and left, her silk robe billowing behind her like a judge's robes. The sound of her footsteps retreating up the stairs felt like an ending. Madison's hands were shaking. Lorraine reached out and steadied them. Are you okay? I'm terrified, Madison admitted, but I'm also done being invisible in my own life. Done pretending everything is fine when it's not. Done ignoring what's right because it's inconvenient. Your mother will come around, Lorraine offered, though she wasn't sure she believed it. Maybe, or maybe she won't. Either way, I have to do this. Madison straightened her shoulders. Victoria Reeves wants to meet at 11. Can you be there? Lorraine thought about her schedule. The endless list of tasks Mrs. Ashford would have prepared. The cleaning and cooking and invisible labor that filled her days. Then she thought about Michael in the guest house, about the truth that needed telling, about the small chance they had to make something right in a world that felt increasingly wrong. I'll be there, she said. The meeting took place in the guest house, which had been hastily converted into a makeshift conference room. Victoria Reeves arrived exactly at 11, a black woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun and eyes that missed nothing. She carried a leather briefcase that looked older than Madison and wore a suit that was expensive but not ostentatious. Michael sat at the small dining table, freshly showered and wearing clothes Madison had brought from her father's closet. He looked more like the CEO he'd once been, and less like the homeless man Lorraine had been feeding for months. The transformation was jarring. Mr. Hendricks, Victoria said, shaking his hand firmly. I've spent the last 12 hours reviewing every public document related to your case. I have questions. Many questions. But first I need to know, are you prepared for what comes next? Because if we pursue this, there's no going back. You'll be visible, vulnerable. Every detail of your life will be examined. I've been invisible for 6 years, Michael said. Maybe it's time to be seen. Victoria nodded approvingly and opened her briefcase, pulling out folders thick with documents. Then let's begin with what actually happened. Walk me through the day you discovered the embezzlement. For the next 3 hours, Michael talked. He described finding the discrepancies in the accounts, the shell corporations, the bribes disguised as consulting fees. He explained his confrontation with Richard Chen, the threats that followed, the way evidence had been manufactured to frame him. Victoria listened, taking notes, occasionally asking pointed questions that revealed her prosecutorial background. Lorraine and Madison sat quietly, bearing witness to a story that grew more troubling with each detail. Here's what I'm seeing, Victoria said finally. The case against you was circumstantial at best. No direct evidence, just a paper trail that could have been created by anyone with access to the accounts, which Richard certainly had. The prosecutors never pursued it aggressively, which suggests political pressure or inadequate resources. When you disappeared, they filed it away as a cold case. No one was looking for you. Until now, Michael said. Until now, Victoria agreed. But here's the thing. Statute of limitations hasn't run out on the crimes Richard committed. Wire fraud, bribery of government officials, securities fraud. If we can prove what he did, he's looking at serious federal charges. Can we prove it? Madison asked. Maybe. The company's servers from that period. They'd have backups, logs, digital fingerprints. If we can get a court order to access them, we might find evidence. But that requires convincing a judge that there's probable cause to investigate. And how do we do that? Lorraine asked. Victoria smiled for the first time, and it was fierce. We tell your story. All of it. Not just the video that went viral, but the whole truth. We make enough noise that prosecutors have to reopen the case. We use public pressure to force transparency. She paused. But I need to be clear. This will get ugly. Richard Chen has billions of dollars and an army of lawyers. He'll attack your credibility, dig up every mistake you've ever made, threaten everyone connected to you. He already threatened me yesterday, Michael said. Tried to intimidate Lorraine, made Madison a target. The ugliness has already started. Then we fight back. Madison said firmly. Victoria studied the three of them, a former CEO, a domestic worker, and a privileged college student. An unlikely coalition bound by a moment of visibility that had spiraled into something none of them could have predicted. "All right," Victoria said. "Here's the plan. We file a civil lawsuit against Richard Chen and Hendrix Global Solutions for fraud and defamation. We demand access to company records. We give interviews to every news outlet that will have us. We make Michael's story impossible to ignore." "When do we start?" Michael asked. "We already have," Victoria said, pulling out a document. "I prepared preliminary paperwork this morning. I just need your signature." Michael reached for the pen, then hesitated. If we do this, people could get hurt. You all could face retaliation." Lorraine thought about Mrs. Ashford's anger, about the dismissive statement from Hendrix Global Solutions, about the precarious nature of her own employment. Then she thought about 3 months of shared sandwiches, about the quiet dignity of seeing and being seen, about the possibility that even small people could stand against large forces. "I'm already hurt," she said quietly. "Every day, in ways that don't show. Maybe it's time to fight back against that hurt." Madison nodded. "What?" she said. Michael looked at Victoria. "And you? What do you get out of this?" "Justice," Victoria said simply. "It's old-fashioned, I know, but some of us still believe in it." She pushed the document across the table. "Sign here, Mr. Hendrix. Let's go to war." Michael signed. And in that moment, with pen touching paper in a guest house in Buckhead, Atlanta, everything changed again. The helicopters had been just the beginning. What came next would test them all in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But they would face it together, visible, vulnerable, and finally ready to fight. The lawsuit was filed on Monday morning at 9 a.m. sharp. By 9:15, Victoria Reeves had sent copies to every major news outlet in Atlanta. By 10, the story had gone national. By noon, it was international. Lorraine watched it unfold from the uncomfortable position of being at the center of something she couldn't fully control. She'd called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years, an act of rebellion that felt both terrifying and necessary. Mrs. Ashford had left a voicemail that Lorraine hadn't listened to. She knew what it would say. She knew she was probably fired. Strangely, the knowledge didn't devastate her the way she'd expected. The guest house had become command central. Victoria worked from the dining table, her laptop connected to a printer that churned out documents continuously. Madison managed social media, responding to the flood of comments and messages. Michael gave interviews via video call to journalists from CNN, NBC, The Wall Street Journal. And Lorraine made coffee, organized papers, and tried to understand how her life had transformed so completely in less than a week. "Lorraine, you're up," Victoria called. "BBC wants to interview you in 20 minutes. "Me? Why me?" "Because you're the heart of this story," Victoria said. "You're the person who saw Michael when everyone else looked away. You're proof that humanity exists even in systems designed to destroy it." Lorraine sat in front of Madison's laptop, her hands trembling as a British journalist appeared on screen. The woman had kind eyes and a gentle voice, but her questions were sharp. "Ms. Miller, some critics say you were naive to help Mr. Hendrix without knowing his history. How do you respond?" Lorraine thought carefully. "I didn't need to know his history to know he was hungry. I didn't need to understand corporate fraud to understand human dignity. Maybe that's not naive. Maybe that's just being human. Hendrix Global Solutions has released a statement calling you a well-meaning but misguided woman being manipulated for publicity. What's your reaction?" Lorraine felt anger flash through her, but she kept her voice steady. "I've been called invisible my whole life. I've worked in homes where people talked about me like I wasn't there, made decisions about my life without asking me, treated me like furniture. Now I'm suddenly misguided because I made my own choice to help someone. I'll take misguided over invisible any day." The interview went viral within hours. "I take misguided over invisible" trended on Twitter. News segments replayed Lorraine's words. Opinion pieces debated the nature of charity, the psychology of invisibility, the ethics of wealth. But Richard Chen wasn't sitting idle. On Tuesday morning, Hendrix Global Solutions held a press conference. Richard stood at a podium flanked by lawyers, his expression somber and reasonable. "We understand that in today's climate, viral videos can create powerful narratives. But narratives are not facts. Michael Hendrix was my mentor, my friend. It broke my heart when I discovered his betrayal. It breaks my heart now to see him manipulate kind people like Ms. Miller and Ms. Ashford to rehabilitate his reputation." He pulled up documents, financial records, emails, Testimony from the original investigation. These are the facts. Michael Hendricks embezzled $17 million from the company he founded. When confronted, he fled. Now 6 years later, facing the consequences of his actions, he's created a fairy tale about being framed. It's creative, it's compelling, but it's not true. The press conference was masterful. Richard appeared wounded but dignified, more sad than angry. He positioned himself as the victim of a smear campaign, Michael as a con artist and Lorraine as a dupe. Within hours, the narrative began to shift. Doubt crept into comment sections. Think pieces questioned whether everyone had been too quick to judge. Victoria watched the press conference with a grim expression. He's good. I'll give him that. He knows how to play the game. So what do we do? Madison asked. We play it better, Victoria said. She turned to Michael. Time to show them what we've got. What they had, it turned out, was Caroline Hendricks' diary. Michael had kept it hidden for 6 years, unable to look at it, unable to throw it away. His wife had been meticulous. She'd documented everything in the months before her death, her suspicions about Richard, conversations she'd overheard, dates and times that correlated with the fraudulent transactions. She hadn't known what she was recording, but she'd sensed something was wrong and had written it all down. Victoria spent 2 days verifying the diary's contents, cross-referencing dates with corporate records, building a timeline that pointed away from Michael and toward Richard. It wasn't definitive proof. Diaries weren't admissible as hard evidence, but they were enough to raise serious questions. On Thursday, Victoria released excerpts to the press with a statement. Caroline Hendricks died believing something was destroying her husband's company. She was right, but it wasn't her husband. The diary entries were heartbreaking. Caroline wrote about Michael's confusion, his denial that anything was wrong, his trust in Richard even as the evidence mounted. She wrote about wanting to protect him, about not knowing who to trust. Her final entry, dated 3 days before her death, read, Michael won't listen. He can't see what Richard is doing. I'm going to the board tomorrow. I have to try. For him, for us, for the company he built with his own hands. She never made it to that board meeting. She died the night before. The revelation changed everything. Suddenly, the story wasn't about embezzlement. It was about a woman who'd tried to save her husband and paid with her life. It was about grief and betrayal and the long shadow of truth. Social media exploded again, where justice for Caroline trended worldwide. Pressure mounted on prosecutors to reopen the case. Former Hendricks Global employees began coming forward with their own stories of suspicious activities, of questions they'd been afraid to ask, of Richard Chen's iron grip on company operations. But with visibility came vulnerability. On Friday morning, Lorraine's landlord called. Her rent was being raised by $800 a month, effective immediately. When she protested, he was apologetic but firm. New ownership took over the building. Their decision, not mine. Madison's parents formally disinherited her, releasing a statement expressing their disappointment in our daughter's judgment and her association with individuals seeking to profit from false allegations. And Michael received a letter from the federal prosecutor's office. They were reopening the investigation into the Hendricks Global Solutions embezzlement. He was now officially a person of interest again. They're squeezing us, Victoria said, reading the letter. Classic intimidation tactics: make it personal, make it expensive, make people regret getting involved. Is it working? Madison asked quietly. Lorraine thought about her uncertain housing, her lost job, her sudden visibility that felt more like exposure than empowerment. She thought about retreating back into invisibility, back into the safety of being overlooked and ignored. Then she thought about Caroline Hendricks, who'd tried to speak up and been silenced. No, Lorraine said firmly. It's not working. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following Wednesday. Victoria had managed to get a judge to order limited access to Hendricks Global Solutions server backups. Not everything, but enough to verify if the diary's timeline matched the digital records. The courtroom was packed. Media filled the gallery. Lorraine sat behind Michael, wearing a dress Madison had bought her, feeling like an imposter in nice clothes. Madison sat beside her, her phone off for once, her hand finding Lorraine's and squeezing tight. Richard Chen sat across the aisle with his team of lawyers, 6 of them in identical navy suits presenting a wall of expensive legal power. He didn't look at Michael once. The judge was an older black woman named Harriet Mills, with reading glasses perched on her nose and an expression that suggested she'd seen every legal trick in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them. Victoria presented her case methodically. She walked through the diary entries, the timeline, the pattern of transactions that coincided with Caroline's documented suspicions. She showed how the evidence against Michael had been circumstantial, how someone with Richard's access could have easily manufactured it. Richard's lead attorney, a man named Davidson Pierce, countered with the original investigation's findings, character witnesses who testified to Michael's erratic behavior in the months before his disappearance, and financial experts who argued the transactions bore Michael's digital signature. Digital signatures can be spoofed, Victoria argued, especially by someone with administrative access to the systems. That's speculation, Pierce shot back. The burden of proof lies with those making the accusation, Your Honor. My client has been running Hendricks Global Solutions successfully for 6 years. Mr. Hendricks has been homeless, off the grid, avoiding justice. The facts speak for themselves. Judge Mills removed her glasses and fixed both attorneys with a look. The facts, Mr. Pierce, are precisely what we're here to determine. This hearing is about whether there's sufficient cause to allow a full examination of the company's records. Ms. Reeves, what specifically are you looking for? Email logs, server access records, and transaction metadata from April through September 2019, Victoria said. If Mr. Chen's account shows no suspicious activity during the period in question, we'll drop the matter. But if we find evidence of manipulation, falsification, or unauthorized access under Mr. Hendricks's credentials, it establishes reasonable doubt about the original charges. Your Honor, this is a fishing expedition, Pierce protested. The company's servers contain proprietary information, client data, sensitive contracts. Opening them to hostile examination could cause irreparable harm. Then your client should have nothing to hide, Judge Mills said dryly. She reviewed her notes. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm appointing an independent forensic analyst to examine the specific server logs requested. This analyst will report directly to the court. Neither party will have access until the analysis is complete. If evidence of tampering is found, we proceed to a full investigation. If not, the case is dismissed with prejudice. Are we clear? Both attorneys nodded. Good. We reconvene in 3 weeks with the analyst's findings. Judge Mills banged her gavel. And Mr. Pierce? Tell your client that threatening potential witnesses with rent increases and disinheritance is not the behavior of someone with nothing to hide. One more incident, and I'll hold him in contempt. Are we clear on that as well? Pierce's jaw tightened. Yes, Your Honor. The courtroom emptied slowly. Outside on the courthouse steps, reporters swarmed. Lorraine stood slightly behind Michael and Victoria, trying to blend into the background. Old habits died hard, but a reporter called out, Ms. Miller, how does it feel to be at the center of one of the biggest corporate fraud cases in years? Lorraine froze. Madison gave her an encouraging nod. She stepped forward, into the lights and cameras, into the visibility she'd spent her life avoiding. It doesn't feel like anything special, she said honestly. I didn't set out to be at the center of anything. I just fed a hungry man. Everything that came after. That's what happens when you actually see people instead of looking through them. Maybe if more of us did that, there'd be fewer cases like this. Fewer people who think they can get away with anything because they've made themselves too powerful to challenge. Are you worried about retaliation? I'm terrified, Lorraine admitted. I lost my job. My rent got raised so high I'll probably lose my apartment. I went from invisible to exposed overnight. But you know what's worse than being terrified? Being invisible and accepting it. Being treated like you don't matter and believing it. So yes, I'm scared. But I'm also done being small. The clip played on every news channel that evening. And done being small became a rallying cry. Women shared their own stories of invisibility. The domestic workers, the service employees, the caregivers, the people who made the world function while being treated as if they were invisible. 3 weeks felt like 3 years. Lorraine found a new job. Victoria had connected her with a family friend who owned a small business and needed help with office management. It paid better than the Ashford position, treated her like a human being, and came with health insurance. Madison enrolled in online courses to finish her degree while volunteering at homeless advocacy organizations. Michael stayed in the guest house, giving interviews, working with Victoria, slowly rebuilding his sense of self, and Lorraine kept feeding people. She'd started volunteering at a local shelter, bringing meals, sitting with people who'd been made invisible by circumstance and systems. She learned their names, their stories. She saw them. It turned out that seeing people, really seeing them, was revolutionary. When the 3 weeks ended and they returned to court, the atmosphere was different. More tense, more electric. Judge Mills took her seat and called for the forensic analyst's report. The analyst, a slight man in his 30s named Dr. James Wu, approached the stand. "Your Honor, I've completed my examination of the server logs in question. My findings are significant." The courtroom held its collective breath. The original investigation concluded that transactions were initiated using Mr. Hendricks's administrative credentials. However, examining the metadata more closely, I found discrepancies. The timestamps show activity during periods when security logs indicate Mr. Hendricks was physically logged into different terminals across the building. Unless he can be in two places simultaneously, someone else was using his credentials. Pierce jumped up. That could indicate Mr. Hendricks gave someone his credentials to act on his behalf. "I'm not finished, Mr. Pierce," Dr. Wu interrupted calmly. "I also found evidence of credential cloning, a sophisticated technique where someone with high-level access creates a duplicate digital identity. The clone was created from Mr. Richard Chen's administrative account. And there's more. Email records show that in August 2019, someone accessed Mr. Hendricks' account to delete correspondence with the SEC about suspicious transactions. The access came from Mr. Chen's office terminal." The courtroom erupted. Judge Mills banged her gavel repeatedly. "Order! I will have order!" Richard Chen had gone pale. His lawyers were conferring frantically. Pierce stood. "Your Honor, we need time to review these findings. You've had 3 weeks, Mr. Pierce. Dr. Wu's report is comprehensive and definitive." Judge Mills turned to Richard. "Mr. Chen, stand up." Richard stood slowly, his confident facade cracking. "Based on these findings, I am referring this matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office for immediate criminal investigation. Furthermore, I am issuing an injunction freezing your assets pending the outcome of that investigation. And Mr. Chen," Judge Mills's voice was steel, "don't even think about leaving the country. You're going to answer for what you've done. U.S. Marshals appeared from the back of the courtroom approaching Richard. Pierce protested vehemently, but Judge Mills silenced him with a look. As Richard was led out in handcuffs, he finally turned to look at Michael. Their eyes met across the courtroom. Former friends, former partners, now on opposite sides of justice. "I gave you everything," Richard said, his voice breaking. "You took everything," Michael replied quietly. "But you couldn't take the truth, and you couldn't make me invisible forever." 6 months later, Lorraine stood in the kitchen of her new apartment, a small but comfortable place in a quiet neighborhood, paid for with money from the settlement Hendricks Global Solutions had offered Michael to avoid further litigation. He'd shared it with her and Madison, insisting that they'd saved more than his reputation. They'd saved his life. Michael had been formally exonerated. Richard Chen was awaiting trial on 14 federal charges. Hendricks Global Solutions was under new management, with Michael serving as a consultant to help clean up the corruption his former partner had embedded in the company's DNA. Madison had started a nonprofit focused on supporting domestic workers, ensuring fair wages, safe working conditions, and dignity in labor that society too often deemed beneath notice. She'd named it Done Being Small, and Lorraine served on the board. There was a knock on Lorraine's door. She opened it to find Michael holding a bottle of wine, and Madison carrying a box of pastries from Lorraine's favorite bakery. "Thought we'd celebrate," Michael said. "It's been exactly 1 year since the helicopters." They settled into Lorraine's living room, which was modest by Ashford standards but felt like a palace to her. As they talked and laughed, Lorraine thought about invisibility and visibility, about how she'd spent so much of her life trying not to be seen, and how terrifying but necessary it had been to step into the light. "I've been thinking," Michael said, "about starting a foundation, something focused on helping people who've been made invisible by our systems. Not just homeless individuals, but anyone society overlooks. Domestic workers, elderly people, immigrants, anyone who's been taught their worth is less than it is." "The Visibility Foundation," Madison suggested. "Actually," Michael looked at Lorraine, "I was thinking we'd call it the Caroline Foundation, after someone who saw the truth and tried to speak it, even when it cost her everything." Lorraine felt tears prick her eyes. "She'd be proud of you, of all of us." "You know what the strangest part is," Michael said. "Those 6 years I spent invisible, sitting in that alley, I thought I'd lost everything. But looking back, that's where I found what mattered. That's where I learned that being seen by one person who truly cares is worth more than being admired by thousands who don't." "Profound," Madison teased. "You should put that on Instagram." They laughed, and in that laughter was the sound of people who'd survived something difficult together, who'd chosen courage over comfort, Visibility over safety. Later, after Michael and Madison had left and Lorraine was alone in her apartment, she stood at the window looking out at the city. Somewhere out there were other invisible people, sitting in alleys, working in houses where no one saw them, existing in the margins of a society that had decided they didn't matter. But they did matter. Every single one of them mattered. And maybe, Lorraine thought, that was the real revolution. Not the lawsuits or the settlements or the justice served, but the simple, radical act of seeing people, of refusing to let anyone be invisible, of sharing sandwiches with strangers and discovering they're not strangers at all. They're just people who've been waiting for someone to notice they're there. She thought about Caroline Hendricks, who'd tried to save her husband and lost her life, but whose words had ultimately revealed the truth. She thought about Madison, who'd used her privilege as a weapon for good. She thought about Michael, who'd lost everything and found himself in the process. And she thought about herself, Lorraine Miller, 42 years old, domestic worker, friend, revolutionary, a woman who'd been invisible for so long that visibility felt like putting on new skin. It was uncomfortable. It was terrifying. It was absolutely necessary. Her phone buzzed. A text from Michael. Meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. to discuss the foundation. Bring ideas. And Lorraine, thank you for everything. She smiled and texted back. See you there. Through her window, the Atlanta skyline glittered with lights from offices and apartments, each one representing people living their own invisible lives. But somewhere in that city, maybe in an alley or on a corner or behind a service entrance, someone was seeing someone else. Someone was sharing a sandwich. Someone was refusing to let another human being disappear. And that, Lorraine knew, was how change really happened. Not with helicopters descending from the sky, though that made for good television, but with small acts of recognition repeated until they became a pattern, a movement, a revolution of the scene. She turned from the window and went to bed, ready for tomorrow, ready for whatever came next. She was visible now. She was done being small, and she was just getting started. The Caroline Foundation's annual gala was held in a renovated warehouse in downtown Atlanta. Michael had insisted on a venue that reflected their mission rather than the opulence of traditional charity events. The space was filled with people whose lives had intersected with invisibility, former homeless individuals now employed and housed, domestic workers who'd fought for fair wages, elderly people who'd been isolated and forgotten. Lorraine stood at the podium in a simple but elegant dress, looking out at the crowd of 300 people. Public speaking still made her nervous, but she'd learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was acting despite it. 2 years ago, I was invisible, she began. I worked in a mansion where people talked around me, through me, but never to me. I rode buses where passengers avoided my eyes. I existed in a world that had decided I didn't matter. She paused, finding Michael and Madison in the front row. Then I met a man sitting in an alley, and everything changed. Not because he was secretly a CEO, though that made for a good viral video. Light laughter rippled through the crowd. But because in seeing him, I finally saw myself. In feeding him, I fed something in my own soul that had been starving. She gestured to the room. Everyone here has a story about being overlooked, underestimated, or ignored, but we also have stories about being seen, about someone who stopped, who noticed, who cared. The Caroline Foundation exists because we believe visibility is a human right, that everyone deserves to be seen, heard, and valued, not for what they can produce or contribute, but simply for being human. Michael joined her on stage. Caroline wrote in her diary, "The most revolutionary thing we can do is pay attention." She was right. So tonight I challenge each of you, pay attention. See the person serving your coffee, cleaning your office, delivering your packages. Learn their names. Acknowledge their humanity. Because revolution doesn't always arrive in helicopters. Sometimes it arrives in a shared sandwich, a kind word, a moment of genuine connection. As the applause filled the warehouse, Lorraine looked around at the faces, visible, valued, seen. This was the world Caroline had died trying to create. This was the legacy of one woman's courage and another woman's compassion. The invisible had become unforgettable, and they were changing everything. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share. Stories like this need to be told, and your support helps us continue bringing you powerful narratives about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Thank you for watching, and remember, never underestimate the power of seeing someone who's been invisible.